Hey, everybody, and welcome to Life is a Gamble. This is episode number 6, and my guest today is Jason Ladanye. Jason is both a very accomplished musician and magician. I find those two things kind of go hand in hand because they both require a lot of time alone in a room with dedicated practice. So, Jason, welcome to Life is a Gamble.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Good. I wanted to ask which came first, music or magic?
Well, they actually came at very similar times. When I was about 7 years old or so, um, my older brother showed me a card trick, and it just blew my mind. And so that was the beginning of the card magic thing. I wanted to impress my brother back, but I had also we moved into a place that had a piano, and I didn't have any lessons or anything, but I would just sit down for hours and kind of mess around and stuff like that. And of course, I had one of those mothers that were like, "Oh my God, you're so good at everything." So Band-Aid on, she said you could be a surgeon. And if I made toast, she'd be like, you could be a five-star Michelin chef. So when I started showing interest in some of these things, she said, well, let's go get some lessons, or we'll go to a magic shop and have you have someone show you what to do, or I found a piano teacher and we went there. So, and then we kept improving the piano teacher and kept improving on more books and things like that. So she, of course, recognized some of that stuff. But when I was 7 is when it started, and they both, I don't remember which one was first exactly, but they both started within months of each other.
And was there a point where, because you traveled, right, as a musician, a mutual friend of ours told me you played with BB King, is that right?
Oh yeah, I was on the road for 11 years. So basically, I started playing piano at 7, and by 13, I was touring with my first band. It was a local band, but we would do stuff down in New York City. And I remember being in like social studies class thinking like, who else in this classroom is going to be down in New York City playing, opening up for like Buddy Guy or something like that. So as the social studies teacher is teaching me something completely ridiculous that I'll never use in real life. Same thing with chemistry. I'm sitting there like rolling my eyes, going like, what? I don't care about any of this. So I had that kind of mentality super early. But so I was playing with a handful of local bands in my early teens, and then I kept just moving up the food chain. I joined a bigger band that did wider dates, more traveling, and then I joined Ernie Williams and the Wildcats. I think I was about 15 or 16 years old, and they did a lot more touring, but still East Coast kind of stuff. My first big one was Vince Converse. That was all over the United States. That was just nonstop touring. And then the last one was Shamika Copeland, 5 years with her. And that's when we hit all the big bands. That was BB King and opened up for the Stones and Jeff Beck and
Holy
Aretha
cow.
Franklin, Etta James. Oh, the whole, yeah, nine. I mean, those bands are just constantly touring. And tour management basically just says, all right, BB King has 3 months in Spain, you're the opening act. So you got like that, you're going to Spain for 3 months. So yeah, there was quite a bit of travel involved in that. Basically 280 a year, and you were home maybe once
Wow.
every other month just for a few days.
And is that what made you transition into magician full
Yeah,
time? Is the
pretty
life on the
much.
road?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I was learning this stuff, but there was no career involved. I just wanted to try to fool my brother. That literally took like a decade for me to do, and I finally did. One day I showed him a card trick at the kitchen table, and he just didn't say anything afterwards, and I was like, took 10 years, but I got you. So I had been, working on my chops and also just playing piano for fun. So I started making money as a musician early. And of course, when you're 15 years old making 125 bucks for a gig, I mean, that's like you feel like a millionaire. So I had been making money with music first, but and cards was still just a hobby, something fun to do. And I would read books and watch VHS tapes at the time and everything. And of course, when I was on the road, it was kind of like a secret way to get in with other bands. There's a kind of a politics and clique kind of thing on the road where if you're in BB King's band, you are the top of the food chain. You eat in a different place, the dressing rooms are nicer, the green rooms are bigger, and the opening band, you're not allowed to like communicate with those bands. It's like a first class. and coach kind of a situation. So, but having cards, I was able to perform for some of the guys in BB's band, which gave me access to BB King, and right, so they'd be like, get that kid, get that little white kid. And so I come in and I do like a bridge deal, and they all flip out because that's what they played. They played bridge, but no one else in Shamika's band was allowed that kind of access. So I had like this secret little edge. But and that was true for all the bands. That was like my thing that I could use to get in the door, meet some of these people. And I have all the photos. I've took tons of photos with all these guys. So fortunately, I have a huge photo album of all the people that I used cards to get in the door there. But the thing is, on the road, you have so much travel. So you're 8 hours driving, or a 19-hour, 20-hour flight to Australia, whatever. So the cards was a way to kind of keep, I was working on my chops to kind of fill that time, and I could read books and do all that. So that was just how I did. A lot of the other guys were just listening to music and such, but I wanted to keep my hands busy. And I remember we'd go to these amazing places, like we'd be in Paris for like 2 weeks or something like that, and everybody would be out looking at seeing, Eiffel Tower and going to museums and sightseeing and all. I'd be in my hotel room working on my bottom deal. I have a great photo to. I'll email it to you afterwards. Me just sitting in my room, just working on the bottom deal. And I remember on the last day, I'm like, well, I'm in Paris. I'll go out and take a couple pictures, whatever. So yeah, it was kind of an obsession, but that's how I kept myself sane on the road, was to work on that stuff and see the improvement over the years.
It also seems like you chose, at least all of the stuff that I've looked at, you chose gambling sleight of hand over, you know,
Absolutely.
coins
Well, it's
and
just,
cups
oh
and
my God,
balls
yeah,
and
exactly. I don't want to be a magician. The last thing I want is to be associated with like a birthday party magician, which I don't do. I don't do kids shows, even on my websites, sophisticated audiences. I never want to get lumped into that. There's something about cards that, first of all, unifies the whole show, because the whole show, my act is a card show. So from the beginning to the end, I'm talking about gambling and things like that. So the whole show makes sense. If I'm ripping silks in half and then putting them together and then putting a billiard ball through a piece of wood and then making linking rings link, and then I do a blackjack trick, and then I cut a woman in half. Like, the show, it's all over the place. Like, what am I? You're just a variety magician. So and nothing has any meaning. You're just up there saying, look, a perfectly ordinary ring,
yeah.
another ordinary ring, and now they're linked. Well, where's the depth to that? But people understand poker and gambling, and they understand that what is the purpose of linking two rings if you're going to take them apart again? There's no purpose. The coin's there, and then it's not, and then it's there again, and then it's not. So gambling is like, here, you shuffle as much as you want. I'll show you a demonstration that will help you gain an edge in, for example, blackjack. You've shuffled as much as you want. You can cut the cards. When I deal out, there's a natural. People go, what the what? So I did that because you can earn money doing that. And which I did. So there's something that makes a lot more sense about cards. There was nothing appealing to me about magic tricks. Now, yes, at 7 or 8 years old, I did have a lot of that stuff, but it passed real quick. And also the practicality of it. If I was going to be a stage magician, I have to buy a suitcase with a bunch of stuff in it and bring that everywhere, all my props, and feed my doves and buy this thing and buy that thing. My whole act, I can buy at a CVS right before the show. It's a $2 deck of cards. And we did that in Chicago, by the way. We had some issues with luggage. So just recently I had to go to CVS. I was CVS across the street, and we bought like 4 decks of cards, and I did my whole show for the weekend. So there's a practicality to it, but also there's something much cooler about a guy that can hustle in card games than there is a guy that can pull a quarter out of your ear. And that's really what it comes down to. My character does not want to do magic for kids. This is about going into a casino and taking millions of bucks off. Look at the skill set that I have here.
And have you now I didn't ask you about this before we started, and I can cut it if you don't want to answer, but have you used that skill set as other than a magician?
Yes. I'm not. I can be open about it to some extent. We're not going to go, with the guy's name and the date and all that. But there were some home games that I said to myself, I can't take myself seriously. What kind of credibility to be on stage demonstrating this stuff or teaching it or writing books on it without ever actually done it. But I wanted to know what that felt like. What are my nerves like? What does it take to do this stuff? And what is the point of practicing and honing in on all these skills if you're never going to use them? So in short, I used the money that I made from home games as an investment, a safe investment to take that money. That was easy money, obviously. I mean, those kids weren't even paying. I mean, I was so nervous. They were watching the game the whole time. Like the first time I'm like, am I really going to do this? My heart's thumping into my chest. I thought the guy next to me could hear my heart thump. And then I start, and like they're all watching TV, and I finish, and I'm like, well, that was remarkably simple. And I've got a giant pot in front of me. All right. So that I got over that real quick. And then I did it for a couple of years, maybe 3, 4 years. But I used that money to go into a casino. And I was smart enough to say, I don't want to risk a felony uh, by mucking or doing anything heavy handed in a casino. So I just stuck to counting. But I was investing money that was provided to me by home games. And the place that I was working at the time had a 2 deck game. And they played deep into the deck. They played like into the last quarter of the deck. So I was able to make some actual pretty good. I made reasonable money with the home games, but I actually made some pretty good dough at the casino, and that was for another couple of years there. Until one day I showed up and they were all 6 deck shoes, and I'm like, what? And they played like a quarter of the way into them, and I'm like, okay, well the count is minus 60 right now, so I don't know what I'm gonna do with that. So it was just obviously I didn't waste my time with it anymore.
Yeah, and something for our audience. There's a very clear distinction between cheating and counting cards, which is not cheating, not illegal.
Exactly. The stuff I
So
did in home games, remember home games aren't regulated. So yes,
right.
it's not legal to gamble anyway, but the things I did in those home games would get me a time in jail for sure to casino. It's very dangerous to and also it's not even worth it. I mean, you're going to risk so much for one pot. It's just not worth it. So there are guys I know, lots of guys that do this stuff for real that have millions of dollars, but that wasn't for me. You're talking about risks. We'll get to that in a minute, but I made that choice early on. I said I'm gonna stay where I know I can talk my way out of that situation. But when you got guys in suits dragging you to the casino with security footage that proving it, I'm not gonna be able to talk my way out of that. So
Yeah.
I just could see that it wasn't worth the risk.
So while now that we're to the subject of risk, I wanted to get to this story about a big risk that you were faced with.
Well, yes. The first risk um, I had was when I left high school. I had just graduated and I was playing with those bands, and um, I didn't. I know I didn't want to go to college or anything like that. All my other friends around me in school, high school friends and everything, I had a small, close knit group of friends, and they were all going to get jobs. With their dad had offered them my dad can get me in at the railroad station, or I can get in at this factory, or I can get in from that. I knew way back then, after already having a taste of freelance work, gigging and things like that, that working at a job for that many hours and after taxes you get half of it. Like that means, I get out the calculator, be like, that means in a day, in 8 hours, you made $32.80 for 8 hours of work. And they're like, yeah, but at the end of the week, it's $189. I'm thinking to myself, are you out of your mind? And you do this all week. And I remember because I was doing shows for 150, 125 bucks or whatever, and I'm just playing music, like, and it's for 2 hours. So I knew ahead of time that I did not want a job like a boss kind of thing, and I wasn't suited for college at all because I just felt like it's gonna be more of high school. And this was back in '97, so this was before the whole like if you don't go to college you're never going to be successful at anything movement that happened, where the college tuition went through the roof. So college was still like a reasonable thing to do at a high school. So anyway, like clockwork, I had gotten out. I left 60 feet of rubber out of the high school driveway. No joke. I'm not even kidding. I hated that place. And
I hated high school too. I just
man, I was starting to give up in like 10th grade. I was like, am I going to make this? because I got people telling me what to do all day. I can see that this is not anything like algebra and calculus. I'm not going to. Yep. Funny thing, I'm in my 40s. I still haven't used it. I have not used a single thing yet. So um, I got a call from someone that had seen me in New York City at with one of those bands I was playing with, and this was a guy that managed Vince Converse, a guitar player from Texas. He's got a couple albums out, Texas Tea and Sunset Heights, I think. And One Step Ahead, that's the album that I did. But I didn't know any of that at the time. The phone just rang, and this guy's like, "I'm so and so. I'm with Mystic Records, and uh, I saw you play with so and so, and we want to go on tour." And I just talk about risk. I did not know any what I was getting into at all, and he said it's going to be national touring. You're going to do an album, and it makes $400 for local dates, and it makes $600 for festivals, and you're going to be nonstop touring. And you have to move to New Orleans. That's where the band's going to be based. They wanted a central position in the country because if we don't, you know what I mean? If we're living in the East Coast, that means all the West Coast dates are difficult. If you live on the West Coast, all the East Coast. So they said we're going to live in New Orleans, which gives us access to the whole country. And we bought a house for you guys, and there's going to be five of you, and the gig starts like in 2 weeks. And I'm just
Wow.
like, yeah, what do you do there? So quite literally months out of high school, and I'm telling my mom like, "Hey, listen, so I think I might be moving to New Orleans." You know what I mean? But of course, my mom's like, "You're the best, honey. Be safe, but you can. I always knew you'd make it. So, but that's a big increase because you're talking about making $100 a gig to touring full time and making some pretty serious dough. So I was kind of faced with that what do I do thing. And do I play it safe or do I take this risk? And I basically put all my stuff in my car. I drove a Saturn at the time. I quite literally at that age, I was able to pack up my entire bedroom and put it in my car. Like there was nothing. I had a comforter, my television, my movies, clothes. It's just everything. Like the bedroom was just empty. And put it all in this car, and I drove 27 hours straight,
Oh,
like through the night. Yeah, I pulled over to sleep in like Virginia or something like that for a couple hours. And this was before MapQuest and everything. I mean, this was looking at an atlas, and I got that information from touring, being in the bands. We all had atlases back then, so the idea of driving to New Orleans wasn't that crazy because I knew that I'd just go to a gas station and get an atlas, and that'll tell me how to get there. And 27 hours later, I pulled up in New Orleans, right to the gig, actually, like right straight to the gig. Pulled in, the band was like starting in like 40 minutes. It was pretty close.
oh my
And
God. So you're
set of,
exhausted.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
But
No
blues
sleep.
is yeah, but
It's the
blues is
blues, right?
you
It's supposed
you
to be
want
rough.
when you feel like that you're gonna play. Like I knew, like I feel awful. And also, you're 19 years old. What is a 27-hour drive? That's nothing. 27 hours today, I'd be in the hospital. But so I played the gig, and that was the beginning of it. We put all our stuff in a trailer afterwards and moved into our new home and went around the whole country playing music.
Wow.
Now
Yeah.
I did. We lived in Thibodeau, which is outside of New Orleans, and we had this home, and that whole thing lasted, I want to say, a year before, or 6 months to a year, somewhere in that neck of the woods, where we had some financial issue. There was some business issues uh, where the owner of the record label wasn't paying money on time, and then the management couldn't send us money, and there was a lot. There was kind of some business, and then all of a sudden there
Imagine
was
that, a record label
yeah.
screwing the artists.
Exactly, exactly. So there's something called tour support, like the and I've learned this for the first time. When you get these dates, the record company is like supporting you along the way. So the club that you're working at is only giving you like $500, but the record company's like padding that and saying, okay, here's a salary to help you guys go because when you make the album, we're keeping 90% of the album, and that that's our money, and you get the remaining 10%. So they were making all the money on the album that we were selling, but we're out there promoting the album. So that's how we were able to survive on the road because you couldn't live off $100 a gig out there. So they would send us that money, but we'd go check the ATM in the morning and be like, well, that's weird. And then also, of course, the trailer would break down, the van would break down. You're constantly on the road, so there was a lot of issues there. So the whole thing eventually fell apart. But that was my first big risk. Great experience. I learned a ton, and that was my first internet or not international. That was my first national stuff where you're just constantly on the road playing. But I mean, I remember the other thing that was interesting about that. I had just met my first girlfriend, um, and the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen at that time. Just I couldn't believe it. And we were only together for like a month before I left. And so we're in that honeymoon phase, and it was hard to leave her. That's for sure. But we stayed for a whole year there. We did this long distance relationship, and it all worked out.
Worked out for a year. But I mean,
Well,
yeah, as
I'm getting to the
gamblers,
I'm
we have
getting to
that
the next
problem.
jump.
Oh
Getting to the
yeah,
next,
yeah.
yeah, because I did it again in 2001, and I left her again, and we still did it. We were in a relationship for 6.5 years or something like that, and 4.5 of those or 5 of those years I was on the road. So it was just nothing but a long distance relationship. So
But even now, as a magician, you're on the road too, right? Because you do corporate
yes, but
events
it's
and
different. It's different now because everything now is a one-off. Yes, I'll go to. I just did Branson's Island, Richard Branson's island, Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands, and that was for a week. So that was a longer one because you're so far. Actually, it wasn't even that far, but you are 3 different plane rides away. It's not just like I'm flying to Chicago and back. There's a lot of little small islands you jump to, and the planes keep getting smaller. Then you get on a little boat taxi and take another. It's that place is out in the middle of nowhere. So it wouldn't make sense to go out there for 2 days and back. So as part of the deal, we said, all right, let's make it a week. Or I'll fly to Vegas for 2 or 3 days. Or I'll fly to California. Just did Catalina Island a little while ago. Same thing, about 4 or 5 days. So these little trips, and I'm only working for 40 minutes. So you arrive, you get settled in the next day. Then you do the sound check, and then you do the show, and then you have like 2 more days. One day of just I'll hang out, and then the next day is basically chill out. But then you leave in the afternoon or in the evening or something and fly home. So much less work, much less work because you're only doing that small show. You're only there for the small show, and you're kind of padding that whole trip with these days off around it, as opposed to music where they are grinding you to death. You would get into a city at 3, sound checks at 4 to 6, go back to your hotel, change. The show is from 9 to 11:30. Go back to your hotel room, and lobby call is 2:30 in the morning or 3 in the morning to get everybody together to go to drive 2 hours to the airport, get checked in for your 9 a.m. flight to right. So see how there's no, and that's
yeah,
nonstop. That's nonstop. And also, it's not right now. I'm the boss. So with Shamika or with Vince, they would just book as many dates as humanly possible. And I don't have the right to say, oh, I don't want to do that one. You're a part of the band. You're on call. But now I'm in charge. So if I don't want to work for something, or if there's 2 dates that are a couple days apart and something comes in between, I can say, well, no, I don't want to do that because that's going to be too much. How the hell am I going to get out there and back and be ready for this date here? So it's much different when you're your own boss now because you get to kind of pick that schedule. And it's very different. On the road, you do the gig and then hope you get paid. Here you get a contract, you get paid before the date. It's very very different. It's
yeah,
it's very
yeah.
very different because it's corporate. It's corporate work, so everything's all cleaned up.
You had another big risk that you
Yeah,
mentioned.
so basically the same thing happened with Vince. I come home from Vince. Where I played with him for, like I said, about a year or so, and then I ended up getting job, my first job with a real paycheck. I had worked at like a golf course, when I was like 14, 15 years old, but that was just cash on the side kind of stuff. But I had gotten my first job at a bank of all places, and I was already of the crooked mindset. I had already, the card cheating and all, and so here I'm working at a bank. And their security was like unbelievable. They would forget to put the tape in the morning for days at a time. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, the boss would come up to and say, hey, the security tapes have been running for like 4 days now. Okay, guys, you got to remember to do it in the morning." So that
Jesus.
they would prop the back door open with a brick so you could go out and take smoke breaks. So quite literally the back door to the bank is wide open. Like you just walk up to it and pull it open. And then the Brinks man would show up, and that's the guy that takes all the old money and brings you in the new money. And that was $250,000 almost, like 197,000 bucks. It was basically all the money in the safe kind of was always being rotated. So you got $200,000, $250,000, and they wouldn't put that in the safe because the Brinks guy, they're on a tight schedule. They got to hit every bank in the morning, so they can't show up and wait for you to stop working and go and open up the safe and this and then get the thing right. They want to show up, grab the thing, and go. So not only is there a back door that's propped open with a brick, there is an unsupervised giant canvas bag with $250,000 sitting in it. And I remember thinking like, man, do I want to? There's a risk I didn't take. I remember thinking like, it would be so easy to just tell your friend, like, just take this, dig a hole in the wood somewhere, show up, take it. There's no cameras running. Bury it in the woods for like 5 years, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
But I didn't do that. But that was ridiculous. And I gotta say, I'm sure it's changed by now. But the code to the you don't want to know what the code to the safe was? 2345.
Wow.
Not 1234. That's too easy. 2345 was the code to that safe. Oh my God, I've never seen anything in my life like that. So anyway, I was working at that job, and I quite literally answered the phone at that job, and somebody asked for me, and I said, "It's me," and it was John Hahn, who was Shamika Copeland's manager. And John Hahn had seen me with Vince Converse in New York City, and he said, "That's a keyboard player. That's the real deal right there." And he said, we're getting rid of we're firing our old keyboard player, and we need somebody new. And we leave in like a month. And with the first tour date was in Nashville, and we're going to be gone for 3 months straight. Remember one of those big BB King tours? It was a straight 3 months out. So I was on the phone in the bank, and I said, "Well, all right," because I was getting wind of that corporate 9 to 5 rat race bullshit, where I was hired to be a teller. But after like a week's worth of work, the boss would come up and say, "You know what? There's a lot of old paperwork that we need to get done and filed, and I'm going to give it to you because I know you'll get it done," with a little pat on the back, like I'm supposed to be like, "Oh my God, he picked me because I'll get it done. I'm the real worker here, folks. I'm the employee of the month." But I remember when he slapped me on the back saying, "I'll give it to you," and I'm like, "You'll give it to me because I'll get it." Who are you? Like, you do it. Like, the idea of having a boss to me was just the worst thing ever. I was hired to do this, and you're asking for the extra stuff, just like the movie Office Space. We need you to come in on the weekend. And I'm thinking like, you're gonna give me overtime. So now instead of making $35 for a whole day, I'm gonna make $42 for a whole day. Like, wow. So anyway, that phone call came in, and I was in that same situation. I was still with the same girl, and I'm wearing my suit and my tie, and I'm on the phone, and I said, "Sure," and I hung up. And I walked out that day. I told my boss, I said I quit, and he said, "Well, you can't just quit. You have to give 2 weeks." And I was like slowly backing out of the bank, like quite literally something out of a movie where I'm just like, and he goes, "You have to count your drawer and sign it." I said, "I'm sure someone will do it." But you see, I no longer work here because just 5 seconds ago I quit. So that means that's not my job anymore. And he's like, "You can't do that. This isn't a Taco Bell. You can't just wait." And I'm thinking like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I'm
Give
pretty
you
sure you're gonna.
detention?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What are you gonna do? And I walked out, and I never heard from them again. I got my final check and everything, and I still have the nameplate. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have the nameplate. I usually have it right here on my desk as a reminder. I have the original nameplate from that bank with my name on it.
My older son, after high school, he got a job at a casino as a blackjack dealer. And he calls me up after a couple of months and he says, my boss is a complete idiot and he doesn't like me, but because he's my boss, he can just make my life a living hell. And I said,
Can't do it.
welcome to the world.
Yeah,
you know?
I just can't do that. And I had an older brother too that I saw that stuff happening. He's 11 years older than me, so I saw that as a kid, saying, "Well, he hates his job. Like and he's slamming the phone down, and he's coming home in a pissy mood, and he's going in on the weekends. And hey, Michael, you want to go play golf? I can't. I got to work. Like, I had a good learning experience by seeing that ahead of time and said, that's not the life for me. And same thing with kids. How much kids is a commitment, and how much it changes your life, and how it stops certain, like he wanted to do this but kids kind of thing. And I saw that and I said, you know what, I don't want kids either. And people would tell me, you're 10, you're going to change your mind. And no, I just don't, because I just knew that I would have to give up piano and cards and all that to be there for some kid or something. And I just said no. By the way, I did find it. This is 20 some years old. This is the
Ah.
same nameplate from my teller position. And I just always kept it as a reminder of, like, don't ever do what you want to do, and don't ever let yourself end up in this situation where some boss is telling you, I'm going to go make you clean the bathrooms this week because you're going to get it done. And you go, oh, thank you, boss. Oh my God. So anyway, uh, so I left that gig. I drove directly from that show right to Macy's, and I bought luggage, and I got a passport, and I was on the road. Um, I was on the road in within weeks, and I stayed with Shamika for 5 years. So that was a big one because we got paid on time. So that was a little bit different. I was
That
making some
always
pretty good
helps.
money.
Yeah.
And it was international. It was our first international thing, but that gave me access to serious star power, because Shamika was much bigger, Grammy nominated, alligator recording artist. So we got access to some pretty big names and bands that I was able to hang out with and meet and learn. I learned how to play the guitar from watching BB King. Best guitar lessons
Wow.
you'll ever have. Yeah, well, by
Yeah.
the side of the stage. I could listen to those albums for years, but I couldn't always tell by listening. I'd be like, how is he bending like that? I don't know. That's not, when I try it, I can't reach that note. And then when I'd see him, I'd say, oh, he's on the 10th fret. I was trying that bend down there. It's not going to work down there. So I was able to look at him and just watch his hands and see the exact frets that he was on, and every night for the 4 years or 5 years. So those are some tremendous lessons, and I would do that again at a heartbeat. But again, that the same kind of thing. If you think about the risk of it, I'm comparing it to, first of all, do I lose my girl again? And do I? We still made it through the whole thing, through the whole Shamika thing, and also I have this kind of normal life now. And what do I have to compare it to? I have a band that I moved all the way down to New Orleans for, and it all fell apart in 6 months. So I just had to kind of go with it, and I did take that jump.
Yeah. Well, I'm running out of time here. I want to thank you very much for doing this. For our listeners, I will put links in the show notes. You're on all the socials, right? I mean, I follow you mostly on
It's all
Instagram,
card
but
magic. It's all card magic by Jason. And let me just say this one last thing before you go, because I'll keep it under a minute. The riskiest jump of all was to leave music altogether and switch to being a full-time performer, what I do now, because I had to take all that experience, all of those years of touring, and completely shift to a whole new field. I knew I had the chops, but I had nothing. I had no contacts. I had no nothing. And that was the one that I wondered, is this going to work? Because in my field as a magician, first of all, to make it as a magician, that's like impossible. And then to make it just as a magician, and then also to have literally zero income, to say I don't have any, I'm not playing with any bands. I had to leave all that stuff behind. And once I did that, it opened up the schedule, and I just started doing it. And the one thing I wanted to pass on in this podcast, if anyone's in this situation, is like, when it's scary to jump, that's when like, it's okay. Like, if you're nervous but you're super scared about that jump, just do it, because on the other side, you look back and you go, what was I waiting for? And all three times that's happened, all these jumps that I made, I always remember being on the other side of it going, everything's fine. It's not like you make the jump and next in a week you're homeless and think, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. You, as humans, we make that jump, and then you have to make it work after the jump. So it's terrifying prior, but when you make it, it's not so bad. And me doing it three times, that was the thing that I said to myself. when I did the jump into magic and performing. I said, I've made this jump 1,000 times and it's always been okay. And it was. So that's kind of the point I wanted to end on, that if you're nervous about it and you know you hate your job, but you want to do whatever, you want to be a chef or, and you feel like, I'm stuck at home and I got this job. Just do it. Just do it. And you'll
Yeah, I'm a
realize
I'm a
once you make
big
that jump,
advocate
you'll be fine.
of
You'll be
quitting.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. If
And
you're in a bad
I
situation and go ahead.
yeah, after college I moved to Vegas to become a card counter, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I got a job as a blackjack dealer. And after a while, I was making more money playing than I was dealing. And I was talking to a friend who was one of the pit bosses. And I told him I feel like I can't quit because I've, got two mortgages and he was like, "Are you crazy?" He said, "Quit the job." He said, "What's the worst that can happen? I mean, if you go broke or something, you can always go find another job."
I could have gone to
And
back to any band, yeah, after. But when you're in the moment, though, it is terrifying for you. But
yes,
when you
yes, it
look
is.
back,
Yep.
you realize it was this was fine. It wasn't anything. And it was the same thing happened to me when I quit music, making 125, $200 in local gigs and trying to teach on the side and all this other stuff. And after 6 months of doing magic, and I got into the corporate work, and then eventually broke into New York City work, I was making 20 times the money. Like it was such like, what was I thinking? What
Yeah,
was I
yeah.
thinking? And a good local, one of the original bands that I had played with, the singer had passed away. He was 80 years old. He passed away, and we were all at the funeral. And we were walking out to our cars, and of course, it was a great funeral because they were telling funny stories, and it was sad, but it was also there was a tone to it where we were telling these stories to make things feel better. And we all went out in the parking lot, and all these guys I hadn't seen in like 10 years, we're all getting into our cars. And I remember the drummer, he was getting into the same minivan he had, and I had a brand new Mustang, and he stopped and goes, "Wait, how do you afford to drive that?" And I go, "I stopped playing the blues, man." And we laughed and we both drove away. But a ridiculous amount of money because I'm my own boss and I can charge my rates, and breaking into a New York City market, more higher end corporate stuff, and being in charge like that. I'm not just following what someone's giving me. I'm going out and getting it, and that was a huge, huge thing for me. So I just wanted to make sure that we got that last point in. Thank you for letting me say that, because I think that's the whole point of this thing, is to look back and say, it wasn't that bad. You can learn those lessons from other people that have done it, and when you do it yourself, take a moment to appreciate that.
Absolutely. And as I said, I'll put up links to your Instagram and your YouTube, and I'll put up links to both the music and the card magic, which are both just exceptional. So again,
Well,
I
thank
want
you
to
so
thank
much.
you
Yeah,
for
it's
doing
it's
this.
uh, at Card Magic by Jason on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. I don't really care about the other ones, but on those I do a lot of the magic stuff, of course, mostly. But every now and then I'll throw up a couple blues tracks and play some piano or some guitar just to keep my fingers in shape. I still play. I just don't care about trying to make a living doing it anymore. I enjoy playing, just not the business side of it. But so yeah, man, do whatever you want, and make sure you're happy doing it, and that's the secret to life right there. And share it with people.
Absolutely.
That's the other one.
Yep.
Find out what you love to
Yeah.
do, be happy, and share it with people.
Yeah. That's why I'm doing this, I think. So
Beautiful.
yeah. So and next time you're in Vegas, look me up and we'll go have some lunch or something.
Absolutely, will do.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
All right, thanks for having me.